ॐ विश्वन्दर्पणदृश्यमाननगरी तुल्यन्निजान्तर्गतं पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया बहिर्योद्भूतं यथा निद्रया यः साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयं तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नम इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। नारायणं पद्मभुवं वसिष्ठं शक्तिं च तत्पुत्रपराशरं च व्यासं शुकं गौडपदं महान्तं गोविन्दयोगीन्द्रमथास्य शिष्यं श्रीशङ्कराचार्यमथास्य पद्मपादं च हस्तामलकं च शिष्यं तन्तोटकं वार्तिककारमन्यान् अस्मद्गुरून् सन्ततमानतोऽस्मि। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। परब्रह्मनिष्ठं स्वतो धर्मनिष्ठं अहिंसैकनिष्ठं स्वशिष्यै सुजुष्टं यतीनां वरिष्ठं गुरूणां गरिष्ठं दयानन्दरूपं मदाचार्यमीडे। नमः श्री परमार्थाय संसाराध्यासनाशिने श्रोत्रियब्रह्मनिष्ठाय तस्मै ब्रह्मविदे नमः। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन कथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवत्वेषिणीम्। नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयः प्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्ससुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। भीष्मद्रोणतटा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरणनदी कैवर्तकः केशवः पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलं गीताथ गन्धोत्कटं नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाबोधितं लोके सज्जन षट्पदैरहरहः पेपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद् पंकजं कलिमल रध्वंसिनः श्रेयसे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम्। यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनः यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः. I welcome you all to the 9th class of our Bhagavad Gita study. In this class, we will see a summary of the first chapter that we completed in the last class, followed by a brief overview of what to expect in the second chapter. And then we will enter the second chapter, the initial portion of the second chapter. So coming to the summary of the first chapter, the first chapter can be divided into 5 parts. And I'll give you the breakup of the 5 parts based on the verse numbers. So the first part is from verses 1 to 20 that describes the atmosphere on the battlefield and provides the context for where the teaching of Bhagavad Gita takes place, where and when. Then in the second part, which is from verse 21 to verse 25, we have a twist that comes up when Arjuna gets this thought that he wants to inspect the armies on both the sides. He wants to see who is there on both the sides. So that is the second part. Then the third part is from verses 26 to 28, which brings out Arjuna's ragaha, Arjuna's emotional dependence. Then the fourth part is from verses 29 to 35, which brings out Arjuna's shokaha, or Arjuna's sorrow. And the final part is the fifth part from verses 36 to 47, which is the concluding verse that brings out Arjuna's moha. Now verses 31 to 35, they have a mix of shokaha and moha. So when we were discussing these verses, at that point I had said that we could classify them under moha. But having looked at it, there is more of shokaha and less of mohaha in verses 31 to 35. But from verse 36 onwards, the mohaha aspect is very clear. And therefore, verses 29 to 35 can be classified as Arjuna's shokaha, and 36 to 47 can be classified as Arjuna's moha. So we will look at the first part, which is from verses 1 to 20, which talks about the atmosphere on the battlefield and provides the context for where and when the teaching takes place. The first chapter starts with a question by Dhritarashtra to Sanjaya, which is not happening on the battlefield but in the palace in Hastinapura, where Dhritarashtra asks, Dharma kshetre, Kurukshetre, Samaveta yuyutsavaha mamakah pandavaschaiva kimakurvata Sanjaya. So what did my people and the Pandavas do on the battlefield? This is his question. So in response, Sanjaya starts his narration, and then he says that Duryodhana inspected the army on the other side. And then he walks up to Drona and he starts to talk about the warriors on both the sides. And one of the significant verses here is that even though his army is objectively superior. He says, aparyaptam tadasmakam balam bhishmabhirakshitam paryaptam tvidametesham balam bhimabhirakshitam. So here it brings out the fact that even though his army may be objectively superior in terms of the number of people and the number of elephants, horses, chariots, etc., the number of akshauhinis, he still has this insecurity. He still has this insecurity. He feels that it is not sufficient. Even though for pepping up or giving a pep talk, he may say that we have so many people, etc. So this is because he has indulged in adharma. And anyone who is engaging in adharma, who has been engaged in adharma, can never have this internal harmony, peace, and security. Then Bhishma, in order to raise his spirits, in order to cheer Duryodhana, he blows his conch. And we saw that Tasya Sanjanayan Harsham Guru Vruddha Pitamaha Simhanadam Vinadyochaihi Shankham Dadhno Pratapavan. So Bhishma blows his conch after having roared like a lion because he wants to raise Duryodhana's spirits. And then following this, the entire Kaurava army blows their conches and beats their drums and all of that. And then the Pandavas blow their conches one by one. And all these sounds of the Pandavas' great conches come from the various directions. And these sounds, the first chapter says, it reverberated between the earth and the sky. Sa ghosho dhatarashtranam hrudayani vyadarayat. Nabhascha prithivim chaiva tumulo vyanunadayan. So it pierced the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra, says Sanjaya, meaning that it created a certain panic in their hearts, which Sanjaya is indirectly indicating that the sons of Dhritarashtra, are not really a match for the Pandavas. So this is the first part, from verses 1 to 20, a brief summary of the first part. And then comes the second part. Like we said, it starts with atha, which indicates a certain turning point in verse 21, where it says, atha vyavasthitan drishtva dhatarashtran kapithvachaha pravritte shastra sampate dhanurudyamya pandavaha hrishikesham tada vakyam idam aha mahipate. Arjuna uvacha senayor madhye ratham sthapaya mechyuta. So Arjuna sees the readiness of the Kaurava army, and then he asks Krishna to position the chariot in between the two armies so that he can see who is there on both the sides. And as commanded by Arjuna, Krishna places the chariot in between the two armies. And Krishna, as we said, Krishna had some freedom about where to position it. And Krishna positions it in such a way that they are opposite Bhishma and Drona. And Krishna probably did this deliberately because he knew that this may create a certain turmoil in Arjuna's mind, and then would be the chance for him to give out the teaching of the Gita for the benefit of the entire humanity. So this is the second part from verses 21 to 25. Then from verses 26 to 28, they bring out Arjuna's ragaha, or Arjuna's emotional dependence. In verse 27, we saw Tan Samiksha Sakaunteyaha Sarvan Bandhun Avasthitan and Kripaya Paraya Vishtaha Vishidan Idam Abravit. So having seen Sarvan Bandhun Avasthitan, he sees his relatives and teachers, and there's a big list of who all is there. So he sees all these people. And Kripaya Paraya Avishtaha. he is overpowered, gripped, seized by compassion. But as we saw that this is not the compassion that we talk about, generally speaking, but this is misplaced compassion that has arisen out of his emotional dependence upon people, objects, and situations. Born out of an idea that I am deficient, wanting, inadequate, and therefore, for my completeness, I have to have certain people, objects, and situations always around me. But then the world is unpredictable, uncontrollable, and unsustainable, and therefore no person, no object, no situation can last forever. This is a fact of life. And if one is emotionally dependent upon people, objects, and situations, then even their imaginary loss, let alone a real loss, even the imaginary loss of whatever I am emotionally dependent upon will inevitably end in sorrow. And therefore, this is really the kripaya paraya avishtaha is really his attachment. He was overpowered by his own emotional dependence, his own attachment. And this is somewhat analogous to one person's physical health, for example. See, if a person has a weak immune system, if the immune system of a person is weak, then the person will fall physically sick more often in the presence of infections around. There's infection in the air, germs in the air. Then the weaker the immune system, the more frequently this person will become sick. So similarly, there is an idea of mental immunity. So if one has greater world dependence for one's own well-being, the greater one depends upon for one's own emotional well-being, the more the dependence upon the world. And that is like the weakened immunity of the mind. Because situations are guaranteed to change. And when that happens, one will fall mentally sick. So this is the comparison that we can keep in mind with respect to our own physical body and how it gets sick. And similarly, the mind can also get sick more often if there is greater emotional dependence. And therefore, Arjuna says, Drishtva imam swajanam Krishna yuyutsum samupasthitam in verse 28. He uses the word swajanam. Swajanam, these are my people, I am theirs, they are mine. He has this kind of emotional dependence, emotionally intertwined very deeply. And therefore, his ahankara and mamakara is very evident, and therefore ragaha is inevitable. Wherever mamakara is there, ragaha is inevitable. This is the part 3, which brings out Arjuna's ragaha. Then verses 29 to 35 bring out Arjuna's shokaha. And when raga is there, so when ahankara, mamakara is there, raga is inevitable. Emotional dependence is inevitable. And when emotional dependence, raga is there, then shoka is inevitable. And the greater the addiction, the greater the dependence upon the people, objects, and situations, the more will be the symptoms. More will be the symptoms. This is somewhat similar to a person who is addicted, for example, to cigarettes or alcohol. And if now he is in a situation, if he travels, let's say he has traveled somewhere and that night or evening he cannot get the cigarette or alcohol, for example, and he has to live that way for 1 week, just imagine this situation. then such a person can even start to have symptoms at the physical level, maybe trembling in the hands. There's going to be a certain anxiety that will I be able to live without it? And then that may express even at the physical level. So something similar happens to Arjuna. He says, Sidanti mama gatrani. My limbs have become weak. From verse 29 onwards. Sidanti mama gatrani. My limbs have become weak. Mukhancha parishishyati. My mouth has become dry. Vepathushcha sharire me. My body is having trembling. Roma harshascha jayate. My hair is standing on one end. Gandivam sramsate hastat. My bow is slipping from my hands. Tvakchaiva paridahyate. My skin is as though burning. Nacha shaknomyavasthatum. I'm not able to stand. Bhramati iva me manaha. My mind is as though swirling around, he says. Nimittani cha pashyami. I'm seeing so many bad omens. Viparitani. Viparitani Keshava nacha shreyonu pashyami. Tattva svajanamahave. So as we said, he is interpreting situations around him to be bad omens. And that is again indicative of a weakness of his mind, a weakness of his resolve. And then he says, I don't desire this kingdom or pleasures, and what is the use of living? Kim bhogaihi jivitena va, he says, what is the use of living? So he is slipping into some form of depression because he is seeing life as being meaningless without these people. So here we see largely an expression of Arjuna's shokaha, but there is a mixture of traces of mohaha also, because all of this indicates a certain confusion also, a lack of clarity with regards to facts. He is not being objective when he says that life will be meaningless and what is the use of the kingdom and all of these things, because he is not being objective here. And lack of objectivity is some form of moha. And therefore, largely shokaha with traces of moha here. This is part number 4. But from part number 5, which is from verses 36 to 47, Arjuna's moha really becomes very, very evident. Because his dharma adharma vivekaha becomes clouded, and he begins to see the entire dharma yuddha as being adharma, which is very clearly classifiable as moha. So he says, Nihatya dhatarashtranaha ka priti syat janardana, in verse number 36. Nihatya dhatarashtranaha ka priti syat janardana. Apameva shraye dasmat hatva etan atatayina. So he says that the punishment, if we give this punishment to the sons of Dhritarashtra, who he acknowledges are atatayis, who have committed all these 6 forms of the crimes that we talked about. So he acknowledges that they are atatayis, but he says that papameva ashrayed asmat hatva etan atatayina. Meaning, if we kill these people, we will only get papam, he says. And therefore, even though punishing an atatayi is really the Kshatriya dharma, punishing an atatayi should be Kshatriya dharma, and if he does that, he should get punya. But what he is arguing is that they will get papa out of it. So what is punya? He's seeing as papa. And what is papa? Which would be the omission of his duty would be papa. So not doing his duty would be papa. But then he is seeing that as punya. So this indicates Arjuna's moha. And then Arjuna now starts to justify his stand. Like we said, when the mind is confused, then if a person doesn't realize that I am confused, then he can use his own intellect to justify his position. The intellect joins the mind. And therefore now starts Arjuna's justification of why this war is adharma. And like we said, standalone, a lot of what Arjuna said is reasonable, given that there is scriptural justification for it also. But then here he is using that to justify his own position. And therefore Arjuna starts on the discourse where he emphasizes on the value of kula dharma, meaning and the importance of the family as a unit. So then he gets into the importance of the family and the family dharmas, the practices, customs, traditions, culture, rituals, etc., and why those get lost. And if those get lost, then it will cause a lot of problems. So he talks about that in verse 40, where he says, Kulakshaye pranashyanti. Kuladharmaha sanatanaha dharme nashte kulam kritsnam adharmo abhibhavati uta. Adharmaha abhibhavati uta. So he's saying that a lot of able-bodied men will be killed in this battle. And when the men die, then their families are destroyed. And when the families are destroyed, meaning the families will lose an important member of the family. And that will lead to a loss of the kula dharma. It will lead to a loss of the kula dharma. And therefore, adharma will increase. When kula dharma declines, then the artha kama pursuits of the family members are no longer guided or constrained by dharma. And the kula dharma is gone. And therefore, life becomes artha kama pradhana. And this would be an artha kama pradhana life that is not guided by dharma, means it will be guided by adharma. And therefore, adharma will increase. And when adharma will increase, then he says that women will fall into improper conduct. And when women fall into improper conduct, then there will be a mix-up of the varnas. And when there is a mix-up of the varnas, again the pursuit of the next generation will not be guided by dharma, and therefore it will become a materialistic society whose only goals are artha and kama and nothing else. Earn on weekdays, enjoy on weekends. And that is all there is to life, nothing more. So one will degenerate into that kind of a society. And when that happens, then the people of the present generation who are not following dharma, they will go to naraka. And because they have given up all the rituals, including the post-death rituals, their ancestors, he says, will also fall. Their ancestors will also suffer. And therefore, Arjuna says that this entire war is adharma. And therefore, in verse 46, which is the last thing that Arjuna says, he says, Yadimam apratikaram ashastram shastrapanayah dhatarashtra rane hanyuhu tanme kshemataram bhave. That if I am unarmed and I don't offer any resistance, and if the sons of Dhritarashtra who are armed, if they were to kill me, then that would be better than engaging in this war, which is adharma. That is the last statement that Arjuna makes. And then Sanjaya says, Eva muktva junas sankhye rathopastha upavishat visrijya sasharam chapam shoka samvikna manasaha. So Arjuna then sits down on the chariot in the middle of the battlefield, having dropped his bow and arrow. And dropping his bow and arrow is indicative of Swadharma Parityagaha. And therefore, we have seen Arjuna go through all the symptoms of Ragaha, Shokaha, Mohaha, culminating in Swadharma Parityagaha. So he has been completely taken over by all these symptoms of the disease of samsara. This is what the first chapter is indicating. So as we have seen, the message that we should extract from the first chapter is that when a person is suffering from some disease, then the person experiences the disease in the form of some symptoms, some distressing symptoms. But he doesn't know the specifics of the disease or its root cause or its remedy or treatment. He doesn't know that. So for some time he may try some self medication, or he may try symptomatic cures, etc. But the self medication and symptomatic cures and all of that, they leave the root cause untouched. And as long as the root cause is not addressed, the symptoms will keep appearing in different forms again and again. And therefore, at some point, he has to acknowledge his own helplessness in treating the disease and approach an expert who understands the disease in terms of the root cause and its treatment. So, in the first chapter, Arjuna discovers the distressing symptoms of the disease of samsara in terms of ragaha, shokaha, and mohaha, in terms of emotional dependence and his sorrow and confusion. So now the question is, then what about the root cause and the treatment? So that is going to be revealed in chapter 2. Chapter 2, the root cause and the treatment will be taught by Sri Krishna. But before that, certain other things have to happen. So right now, Arjuna has discovered the disease in terms of the symptoms. But Arjuna is yet to acknowledge his own helplessness. So Arjuna has to discover his own helplessness. That's the second stage. After the discovery of the symptoms, distressing symptoms, one has to discover one's own helplessness. And then the third stage is that Arjuna has to then approach an expert who is there in the form of Sri Krishna, to whom he has to surrender. So there are two more things that have to happen after the discovery of the distressing symptoms. One is discovery of his own helplessness, and then surrender to Bhagavan Krishna. So much like a patient who has undergone all these distressing symptoms and having at some point discovered his helplessness, goes to a doctor and says that I am not able to deal with this disease. Now I hand myself over to you. And now whatever treatment you are going to say, I am going to follow it. So this kind of an attitude has to come about. And then Sri Krishna will be in a position to suggest the root, to talk about the root cause and the remedy, treatment, etc. And then the important message that we have to extract from the first chapter is that this is not just Arjuna's problem. What we are seeing here is a specific instance of the fundamental human problem. It's a universal human problem. And being a universal human problem, it is also my problem. Because in case of Arjuna, he was dependent upon certain people, objects, and situations. But in case of every human being, including myself, I have to see that I have got all of these attachments and dependencies, and that will inevitably result in shokaha and moha. And therefore, this is a fundamental human problem, which is also my problem. And when I appreciate this, only then that remedy that Bhagavan Krishna talks about will be a remedy not just for Arjuna, but for me also. So with this, we conclude our discussion of the first chapter, and we will see a brief overview of what to expect in the second chapter. So the second chapter is the most beautiful chapter, and it has the essence of the entire Bhagavad Gita. And it gives a comprehensive overview of the root cause and what is the remedy treatment. The second chapter can be divided into 4 parts. The first part of the second chapter is Arjuna's Sharanagatihi, where Arjuna goes through the discovery of the second stage of his own helplessness. And then Arjuna comes to the third stage where he surrenders to Sri Krishna and seeks help from Sri Krishna. So this is the first part of the second chapter, Arjuna's Sharanagatihi. Then in the second part of the second chapter, Bhagavan Krishna talks about the diagnosis of this disease of samsara, what is its root cause, and therefore knowing the root cause, what is the remedy. And therefore here we see that the diagnosis of the root cause is Atma Ajnanam. It is self-ignorance. And hence the remedy for it can only be self-knowledge or Atma Jnanam. And then that remedy has to be carried out through Jnana Yoga, through the pursuit of Jnana Yoga. So this is indicated in the second part. Dhyana Yoga, that Atma Ajnanam is the problem, Atma Jnanam is the cure. And that cure or remedy has to be administered through the practice of Jnana Yoga. This is the second part of the second chapter. Then in the third part, there is a discussion about Jnana Yogyata Praptihi. Jnana Yogyata Praptihi through Karma Yoga. Because whenever a surgery or treatment has to be done, first the person has to be fit for that surgery or treatment. For example, for any surgery that has to be done, one's BP and blood pressure, etc., one's blood pressure and sugar has to be in control. Otherwise, the doctor will not touch the patient. He says, first go and get your BP and sugar in control, then come back. So similarly, for the surgery of Dhyana Yoga to be carried out, one has to have a certain fitness. And that fitness has to be attained, and it is attained through Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is the means to attain Jnana Yogyata, or the fitness to pursue Jnana Yoga. This is the third part of the second chapter. Then in the fourth part of the second chapter, Arjuna asks a question, or what is the nature of a jnani, one who has attained the Atma Jnanam? What kind of a person is he or she, whoever that may be? So here, Bhagavan Krishna talks about this person, a jnani who has attained Atma Jnanam, who is free of this disease of samsara, who is free of this raga, shoka, and moha. All of these symptoms, what is the nature of this person? How does such a person live? And such a person is called, in this context, he is called Sthita Prajnaha, or Sthira Prajnaha, or Ajivan Muktaha. This is the fourth part of the second chapter. With this background, we will now enter the second chapter. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha.
Atadvitiyodhyayaha.
Atadvitiyodhyayaha.
Sankhya Yogaha.
Sankhya Yogaha.
The title of the second chapter is Sankhya Yoga. So the word Sankhya here, Sankhya Yoga here means Jnana Yoga. So Jnana Yoga is the topic of the second chapter. We will enter the first verse of the second chapter. Sanjaya Uvacha
Sanjaya Uvacha
Tantatha Kripaya
Tam Tata Kripaya Vishtam
Ashrupurnakulekshanam
Ashrupurna Kulekshanam
Vishidantamidam Vakyam
Vishidantamidam Vakyam
Uvacha Madhusudanaha.
Uvacha Madhusudanaha.
Sanjaya Uvacha. So here we are reminded that Sanjaya is now continuing his narration to Dhritarashtra about what happened after Arjuna sat down on the chariot, being overcome with sorrow, having dropped his bow and arrow. What happened subsequently? So Sanjaya Uvacha. And Sanjaya says, Vishidantam idam vakyam uvacha Madhusudanaha. So he says uvacha. So Sanjaya is saying uvacha means he said. Sanjaya says he said. So who said? Madhusudanaha uvacha. So Krishna said, he says. So Krishna is addressed by Sanjaya here as being Madhusudanaha. So as we have seen before, the word Madhusudanaha indicates the one who slayed the Rakshasa called Madhu. So Madhu has got another meaning also, which is sweet. Anything sweet is also called Madhu. And therefore, Madhusudana has a slightly deeper meaning also that we can look at. Because for everyone, one's own ahankara, which is this limited individual, this body and the mind, which one is associated with, and I say I am the body and the mind. So this ahankara is very sweet, and one is very interested in the preservation of this limited self, which is ahankara. And therefore, one is always trying to adorn this, like we said, adorning a broomstick. One is always trying to adorn this apurna, limited individual, and always one is not willing to drop it. Always thinking about it, and always holding on to it, and trying to boost this. And therefore, everybody looks upon it as something sweet. And Bhagavan is one by whose grace this limited individual is destroyed. By knowing Bhagavan, by knowing Bhagavan, one ends up falsifying. Destruction of the limited individual is a falsification of this ego, this false sense of self. So that is another reason why Bhagavan is called Madhusudanaha. So now Madhusudanaha Uvacha, Krishna said. And to whom did he say? So in the first quarter we have Tan Tatha Kripaya Vishtam. So Tam, so Madhusudanaha Tam Uvacha. Madhusudanaha Tam Arjunam Uvacha. So Krishna is telling Arjuna. And what kind of Arjuna is he? He says, Kripaya Avishtam Ashrupurna Kulekshanam. So Kripaya, Tatha Kripaya Avishtam, who was overpowered by this misplaced compassion, was overpowered by his emotional dependence, was overpowered by raga. So this is overpowered because, as we said, that this was not an emotion that he could deliberately entertain. and then drop it when he was done entertaining the emotion. The emotion had gripped him, so the emotion was was in control. He was no more in control of his emotion. Therefore, kripaya avishtam. And ashru purna kule kshanam. Ashru means tears. And purna means full of. So ashrubhihi purne, ashru purne. Because it's referring to the eyes and therefore we use the dual number. Ashru purne. So ashrubhihi purne means eyes that are full of, means whatever is full of tears. Two things that are full of tears are called ashru purne. And akula means distressed, confused, blurred is called akula. So his eyes were distressed, confused, blurred, and therefore akule. So ashrupurne cha akule cha ashrupurna kule. So the eyes are confused, blurred, distressed, and full of tears. So ashrupurna kule ikshane yasya saha ashrupurna kule kshana ashrupurna kule kshanaha tam. So ashrupurna kule kshanam means his eyes were full of tears and his eyes were distressed, confused, blurred. So since Arjuna is a warrior, he was holding back his tears. Tears were coming into his eyes, welling up in his eyes, but he did not let them flow. So the tears were building up in his eyes. That's what Ashrupurna Kulekshanam indicates. So Kripaya Avishtam indicates that he was gripped by Raga, and Ashrupurna Kulekshanam indicates that he was gripped by Shoka. And again, what kind of Arjuna did Krishna tell? Vishidantam means one who is grieving. To the grieving Arjuna Madhusudanaha said. So Madhusudanaha tatha kripaya avishtam ashrupurna kulekshanam tam uvacha. Vishidantam tam uvacha. And what did he say? He says, idam vakyam, vishidantam, idam vakyam. So Madhusudanaha tam idam vakyam vacha. He said these following words to Arjuna. So what are those words? We will see what Sanjaya says next. In verse number 2. Shri Bhagavanuvacha.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha
Kutastvakashmalamidam
Kutastvakashmalamidam
Vishame samupasthitam
Vishame samupasthitam
Anaryajushtamasvargyam
Anaryajushtam asvargyam
Akirtikaram Arjuna.
Akirtikaram Arjuna.
For the first time, now we have Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Krishna was so far listening patiently to what Arjuna had to say. And for the first time, Krishna is saying something significant now. Although in the first chapter he said a few words, there was no Shri Bhagavan Vacha in the entire first chapter. So he says, if we look at the last word if we split the second line, then it is Anarya Jushtam Aswargyam Akirtikaram Arjuna. So he's addressing Arjuna. He says, hey Arjuna. And then in the first quarter we have Kutaha tva. Kutastva is really kutaha tva kashmalamidam. Kutaha, from where, he asks. Kutaha, from where? From where what? Idam samupasthitam. So kutaha tva kashmalamidam vishame samupastitam. So kashmalam idam vishame samupastitam. So we take kutaha idam samupastitam, meaning from where has this come, he asks. From where has this come? Kutaha idam samupastitam. And what is this that Krishna is talking about? Kashmalam. Kutaha idam kashmalam samupastitam. So kashmala refers to despair or depression, despondency. So from where has this despair, depression, despondency come? He is asking. Bhagavan Krishna asks Arjuna. And to whom? He says, Tva. Kutaha. Tva idam kashmalam samupasthitam. Kutaha tva. To you, he says. Where has this despair come to you? And so what kind of despair is it? So in the second line, he says, Anarya Jushtam. Anarya Jushtam. Anarya Jushtam. So here, Aryaihi Jushtam. Aryaihi Jushtam is Arya Jushtam. And Na Arya Jushtam is Anarya Jushtam. So Aryaihi, Anarya Jushtam means that which is not befitting or becoming of an Arya. Not befitting or becoming of an Arya. If something is becoming or befitting of an Arya, then it is called Arya Jushtam. But its opposite is Anarya Jushtam, meaning one that is something that is not becoming or befitting of an Arya. So this despair is not befitting or becoming of an Arya, he says. So now the question is, who is an Arya? So if we think about Arya, the first thing that probably comes to our mind is our history books, where we were taught about how the Aryans came from some foreign country, and India was totally occupied by Dravidians. And then these Aryans fought with the Dravidians, and then they pushed all the Dravidians to the south. So this is how most people understand who an Arya is. But Arya is not some foreign word. It's very much a word in Sanskritam. And there's also a shloka that talks about who an Arya is. And that says, Kartavyam acharan karyam akartavyam anacharan. So Kartavyam acharan karyam akartavyam anacharan tishtati prakritachare sava arya iti smritaha. So Kartavyam acharan, meaning doing what? Doing whatever has to be done. Kartavyam acharan. Kartavyam means that which needs to be done. Acharan means doing. So acharan means doing whatever needs to be done. Kartavyam acharan. Karyam akartavyam anacharan. And whatever should not be done, not doing that. Tishtati prakritachare. So one is engaged in whatever has to be done at any given time. He is engaged in doing that. Sava arya iti smritaha. So such a person is called an arya. Means one who does what needs to be done. His life is not governed by his own likes and dislikes. That I like to do this, therefore I do it. I don't care whether it's proper or improper. This is the attitude of a materialist. Or I don't like to do this. And even if it's the right thing to do, I somehow try to avoid doing it and do something else. So such a person would be an anarya. An arya is one who does something that needs to be done irrespective of his personal likes and dislikes. Arya, anarya jushtam, this is not befitting or becoming of an arya, he says. And asvargyam means that this is not something which will lead to swarga. Arjuna said Arjuna said that the fighting, engaging in this war will lead to the destruction of families, and then he gave the big chain of events that would finally lead one to Naraka. But Krishna is correcting him, saying that not fighting would be the omission of duty, and such an omission of duty would lead to Naraka, not to Swarga, and therefore he says Aswargyam. And akirtikaram means something that would bring him disgrace. So, so people would such a thing would become a big news if somebody who's of the stature of Arjuna gives up in the battlefield or runs away from the battlefield without giving a fight. Then this is going to create a lot of news. Therefore, people would become aware of it, and therefore people would look at him every time and say that, look, this is the Arjuna who ran away from the battlefield. Apujya Swamiji says that if Arjuna goes and settles down somewhere in Rishikesh, for example, after withdrawing from the battle, then there are so many pilgrims who go to Rishikesh for Ganga Snanam. And then after having finished their Ganga Snanam, they would say, what is next on their agenda? They would say, we will go to where Arjuna is sitting in Rishikesh. They'll go and see because everybody has heard about it. And so throngs of people would be there who, after having done Ganga Snanam, they would go and see that this is the Arjuna who ran away from the battlefield. So, akirtikaram. And then for Duryodhana, it would basically be a walkover. For Duryodhana, he would just give a walkover. And then the winner always scripts history. This we have seen time and again in history, that the winner always gets to write history. And therefore, nowadays we are talking about all the information warfare, right? The information warfare and who wins the narrative. So even if you win a war, sometimes you can lose the narrative, and then everybody will start to criticize you. But here Arjuna gives up, then Duryodhana would effectively get to control the narrative. And Duryodhana will make sure that the real reasons for why Arjuna exited from the war would never get recognition. So this is like spreading false news, which is a big concern these days too. So Bhagavan Krishna is indicating akirtikaram. So Duryodhana could spread a lot of false news and make sure that the real reasons don't come out, and he would make sure that Arjuna is painted negatively in all of the narratives. And Pujya Swamiji says that even the normal soldiers on the Kaurava side, they would all get together, and of course after the war they may celebrate, and then they will all boast about what all they did. And some of the soldiers, some soldier may even say that, no, I stared at Arjuna and then I just twirled my mustache. And then there was Vepatuscha Sharire Me. So there was trembling, Arjuna was trembling, and he just ran away. So all this kind of false news would take over. And Arjuna was a highly adorned person. If you look at it, for example, a military commander who has been given many awards, they carry all of these badges, right? Whatever awards they have received. So, so the award definitely adorns the person. The award adorns the person, but the award adorns the person because previously great people have adorned the award. So a person who gets the award feels uplifted because previously somebody great has gotten it, and that's why that person feels uplifted by that award. So the award certainly adorns the person because previously great people have received that award. But then sometimes what happens is that if the award committee gives that award to somebody who's undeserving, then that elite circle, the people who are in that elite circle feel embarrassed holding on to that award. Or if somebody who has received the award now does something that is unworthy, then the people who have received the award may actually return their award, saying that this award has no meaning now because you have given it to somebody who is now a disgrace for the award. And therefore, Arjuna was a highly awarded, recognized person. And if he did something like that, then that would bring a lot of disgrace, discredibility, dishonor. And therefore, Krishna is saying, Akirtikaram. And and when has this despair come? Having said anargya justam asvargyam akirtikaram, when has this despair come? He says vishame. Vishame means in this crisis or difficult situation. Vishame samupasthitam, that this, from where has this despair, this kind of despair come to you in this critical crisis situation? Sri Krishna is asking. Because this is the wrong time and the wrong place. Because at this time, Krishna is indicating that you should be planning war strategy about who to fight, whom to fight, how to fight, and all of this. But instead you are wallowing in sorrow at this point, and you have never entertained such a thought before. For years you were in the forest, you were free, I was also free. And if you wanted to chat about this, we could have sat for days together and talked about this. But this is a crisis in which you have fallen into this despair. From where has it come? Bhagavan is asking. So Bhagavan Krishna is using some strong words here, as we can see. So he has not yet started the teaching, the real teaching. Because the idea is to try to make him get up and fight. And like a charioteer who whips the horses, Sri Krishna is, Swamiji says, whipping Arjuna with his tongue, he's whipping Arjuna. We will read the third verse. Sri Krishna continues. Klaibyam asmagamah partha
क्लैब्यं मास्मगमः पार्थ
नैतत्त्वय्युपपद्यते
नैतत्त्वय्युपपद्यते
क्षुद्रं हृदयदौर्बल्यम्
क्षुद्रं हृदय दौर्बल्यम्
त्यक्त्वोत्तिष्ठ परन्तप.
त्यक्त्वोत्तिष्ठ परन्तप.
So Klaibyam Masma Gamah Partha. So Krishna is addressing Arjuna. He says, Oh Partha, hey Partha. Klaibyam Masma Gamaha. Klaibyam Masma Gamaha means do not give in to unmanliness, he says. Unmanliness. Klaibyam is unmanliness. Do not give in. Do not be overcome by this unmanliness, he says. And na etat. So in the last quarter we have naitatvayupapadyate. That's a lot of sandhis collapsed together. So na etat tvayi upapadyate. That's how you split it. Na etat tvayi upapadyate. So he says na etat upapadyate, meaning this unmanliness, this klaibyam, this unmanliness is not proper, he says. And in whom is it not proper? Tvayi. Na tvayi etat. Etat tvayi na upapadyate. This unmanliness is not proper in you. It does not befit you, he says. Because Arjuna is Krishna is reminding him that he's a great archer. He's a prince. And he's a role model for many people. And a role model is one who should set an example. And leader, he is a leader, a kshatriya, who is supposed to uphold his dharma. And that's why he says such an unmanliness is not proper in you. And then in the next line he says, as we see the last word of the second quarter, last word of the fourth quarter, he says Parantapa. Parantapa is another name of Arjuna. Paran Shatrun Tapayati iti Parantapa, meaning one who is a conqueror of one's enemies. So Krishna is trying to remind Arjuna who he is. And there is a certain story here that when the Pandavas were in Ajnatavasa, and at that time, when that Ajnatavasa was ending, then at that time the Kauravas attacked the Virata kingdom where the Pandavas were. And Uttara Kumara, who's the prince of Virata, he said, I will go and fight the Kauravas. And so Arjuna is still in the form of Brihannala, the dancer. So he says, I will drive your chariot. And therefore he goes with Uttara. But then Uttara becomes very frightened there. And then Arjuna reveals who he really is. And he doesn't believe that this is Arjuna. Brihannala is Arjuna. So Uttara tells him that I have heard of your 10 names. So Arjuna has got 10 names. And if you are able to tell me all those 10 names, then I will believe that you are Arjuna. And at that point, Arjuna narrates his own 10 names. And there is a shloka there that goes like this. Arjuna Phalguno Jishnuhu Kiriti Shweta Vahanaha Bibhatsur Vijayah Krishnaha Savyasachi Dhananjayah. So these are the 10 names of Arjuna. And the tradition holds that if one is afraid, then if one narrates this shloka, then that helps dispel one's fear. So Arjuna is a conqueror of foes, and Arjuna has also fought Parameshwara himself, and of course during the Virata war, he fought against Bhishma, Drona, all of this, the entire Kaurava army. He fought against them. So Krishna is reminding, saying, you are Parantapa, you are the destroyer of foes. So he says, Shudram Hridaya Daurbalyam Tyaktva Uttishta Parantapa, meaning get up. He says, Uttishta, get up. And having done what should he get up? Tyaktva, means having given. So he says, Tyaktva Uttishta. And having given up what? He says, Hridaya Daurbalyam. Give up this weakness of the heart. Hridaya Daurbalyam Tyaktva Uttishta. And what kind of weakness of heart is it? He says, Shudram Hridaya Daurbalyam, a lowly weakness of heart. This lowly weakness of heart, having given up, get up, he says. So Krishna doesn't yet start on the main Gita teaching because Arjuna, as we said, he has to go through those two stages of discovery of helplessness and surrender. So he's whipping Arjuna with his tongue, and he wants Arjuna to finish saying whatever he has to say. So now Arjuna responds in verse number 4. Arjuna uvacha.
Arjuna uvacha.
Katham bhishmamaham sankhye.
Katham bhishmamaham sankhye.
Dronancha madhusudana.
Dronancha madhusudana.
Ishubhif pratiyotsyami.
Ishubhih pratiyotsyami.
Pujarha varisudana.
Pujarha varisudana.
So Arjuna Vacha. Arjuna is now trying to explain himself. So he says, Hey Madhusudana. So he's again addressing Krishna as Madhusudana. And in the last quarter, we have Pujarha Varisudana. So if we split the Sandhi, it becomes Pujarhau Harisudana. Pujarhau Arisudana. Arisudana. So he's addressing Krishna as Madhusudana and Arisudana. Madhusudana is the slayer of the Rakshasa Madhu, as we have seen. And Arisudana is the destroyer of enemies. So he's addressing Krishna as Hey Madhusudana, Hey Arisudana. And then he says, Katham Bhishmam Aham Sankhye Dronancha Madhusudana Ishubhif Pratiyotsyami. So we have Katham and Bhishmam Aham. So we combine Katham and Aham. Katham Aham. And then we have Pratiyotsyami in the second line. So Katham Aham Pratiyotsyami, he says. Meaning he says, how will I fight? Pratiyotsyami means I fight. Katham aham pratiyotsyami means how will I fight? And how will I fight? And with what weapons? With what weapons he's talking about? So he said, Ishubhihi means with arrows. So Ishubhihi katham aham pratiyotsyami means how will I fight with arrows, he says. And fight with whom? He says, Bhishmam aham Sankhye Dronancha, Bhishmam Dronancha. How will I fight with arrows with Bhishma and Drona, he's saying. And what kind of Bhishma and Drona are they? He says, Pujar Hau Harisudana, Pujar Hau, meaning Bhishma and Drona are Pujar Hau, meaning they are worthy of worship. Worthy of worship. So Ishubhihi Pujar Hau Bhishmam Dronam Cha Katham Aham Pratiyotsyami. How will I fight Bhishma and Drona with arrows when they are actually worthy of worship? And fight where? He says, Sankhye, Katham Bhishmam Aham Sankhye. So in this battle, how will I fight them? He says. And then Arjuna here is addressing, as we saw, Krishna, Arisudana and Madhusudana. So he's saying, you destroyed your demons. You destroyed demons. And that's why you're called Madhusudana and Arisudana. But then how am I expected to fight my own gurus who are worthy of worship? Because I've learned everything from Drona and I have grown up on the lap of Bhishma. How can I send arrows towards them? So it was easy for you to kill the demons. You are called Arisudana, Madhusudana. But like Puja Swamiji says, Arjuna doesn't want to be called Guru Sudana. He is one who killed his own gurus. So we read the fifth verse. And the fifth verse is in a different meter, which is the Trishtup Chandaha. Guru Nahatva hi mahanubhavan.
Guru Nahatva hi mahanubhavan.
Shreyo bhoktum bhaikshyamapi haloke.
Shreyo bhoktum bhaikshyamapi haloke.
Hatvarthakamanstu guru nihaiva.
Hatvarthakamanstu guruni haiva.
Bhunjiya bhogan rudhira pradigdhan.
Bhunjiya bhogan rudhira pradigdhan.
In the second quarter, we have Shreyo Bhoktum. So that is Shreyaha Bhoktum. So he says it Shreyaha. Shreyaha means is better. It is better. So to do what is better? He says Bhoktum Shreyaha. We have Shreyo Bhoktum in the second quarter. We rearrange it as Bhoktum Shreyaha. Means to eat is better. He says to eat is better. To eat what? We have Shreyo Bhoktum Bhaikshyam Api. Bhaikshyam Api Ihaloke in the second quarter. Shreyo Bhoktum Bhaikshyam Api Ihaloke. So he says Bhaikshyam Api. Bhaikshyam Api Bhoktum Shreyaha means to eat. Bhaikshyam is better, he says. Bhaikshyam means begged food that is gathered from different houses. That's called Bhaikshyam. He says to eat eat begged food is better. To live on alms is better, he's basically saying. But this begging for food is permitted only for three ashramas: Brahmachari, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasi. Brahmachari means a student. Vanaprastha means one who is retired to the forest. The Sannyasi means one who has become a monk. Only for these three ashramas, begging for food, bhaikshyam, is allowed. For a grihastha, he should be the one who is giving bhaikshyam to others, to the three ashramas. He supports the other three ashramas by giving them food. But then, if a grihastha takes to bhaikshyam, then that is a papa karma. Because if a grihastha takes to bhaikshyam, then everybody will start begging. Then there is nobody to give. And therefore, for a grihastha to take bhaikshyam is considered a papa karma. And therefore, again, Arjuna is talking about saying that this papa karma of begging, which he doesn't see as papa, would be better, he says. Again, paradharmanushtanam is there. And where to eat begged food is better? Where? He says, ihaloke. In the second quarter, we have Shreyo Bhoktum Bhaikshyam Api Ihaloke. So in this world, he said, in this world, eating begged food is better, he says. Having done what? Gurun Ahatva in the first quarter. Gurun Ahatva, meaning, meaning not having killed my gurus. So he's saying that having not engaged in this war, having not killed his gurus, living on alms, living on begged food would be better. And what kind of gurus? He said, Mahanubhavan Gurun Ahatva. So gurus who are Mahanubhava. Mahanubhava means one who has great mahima, great glories. So these glorious gurus, he says, Mahanubhavan Gurun Ahatva, he says, meaning having not killed these great gurus, having not indulged in this war, living on begged food would be better. And then he is comparing it to the opposite situation in the third and fourth quarter. He says, Hatva arthakamans tu guru nihaiva. Hatva arthakaman tu gurun ihaiva. So we rearrange it as gurun hatva tu. We have hatva arthakaman tu gurun iha eva. So we rearrange it as gurun hatva tu, meaning having killed. On the other hand, having killed my gurus. Then what would he do? He said bhunjiya. Bhunjiya means I will experience. Gurun hatva tu bhunjiya. Having killed my gurus, I will experience. And I will experience what? He says, Bhogan, I will experience enjoyments. Gurun hatva tu bhogan bhunjiya, I will experience enjoyments. Bhunjiya bhogan is there in the verse. I will experience enjoyments. And where will I experience enjoyments? He says, Gurun ihaiva in the third quarter, hatva thakamans tu gurun iha eva. So here in this world, I will experience all enjoyments, he says, having killed my gurus. And what kind of enjoyments would they be? Arthakaman. Arthakaman means Arthakaman bhogan. I will experience means I will experience artha and kamaha, means I will experience wealth and pleasures. But what kind of enjoyments would they be? That is the key word he's using. Rudhira pradigdhan, the last word. Rudhira pradigdhan, meaning they would be stained with blood. All of my, having killed my gurus, all of my enjoyments in this world would be stained with their blood. So the sight of his gurus dying would be a haunting sight. It would continue to haunt him in the rest of his life. Even when he is engaging in some enjoyments, He would be reminded of how he has gotten to the enjoyments. They are stained with the blood of all the people who were killed in this battle, especially his own gurus. And one may have had a lot of good time with certain people during their life. But if we see them having gone through a painful death, then oftentimes the memories that one is left with is of the painful end rather than all the good times that one has had in the past. And therefore, he said, Rudhira Pradiktan, meaning this would continue to haunt him. So, again, we see that Arjuna thinks that he has great clarity. He feels that it is better to live on bhaikshyam. And therefore, his dharma, adharma, viveka has been overpowered. So, till this point, Arjuna feels that he is right. Only from the next verse, Arjuna starts to express some doubt. We will see the next verse, because perhaps Krishna's strong words had some effect. It got him thinking, and now he is coming to some doubt about his own position. We will read the 6th verse. न चैतद्विद्मः कतरन्नो गरीयः
न चैतद्विद्मः कतरन्नो गरीयः
यद्वा जयेम यदि वा नो जयेयुः
यद्वा जयेम यदि वा नो जयेयुः
यानेव हत्वा न जिजीविषामः
यानेव हत्वा न जिजीविषामः
तेव स्थिताः प्रमुखे धातराष्ट्राः
तेव स्थिताः प्रमुखे धार्तराष्ट्राः.
So he says, na chaitad vitmaha. We split it as na cha etat vitmaha. He says, we do not know this. He says, na cha etat vitmaha. We do not know this. And what is it that Arjuna is talking about? He says, kataranno gariyaha. Katarat naha gariyaha. Katarat naha gariyaha. Means which of the two is better for us? He says, we don't know which of the two is better for us. And what are the two options? In the second quarter, we have Yadva Jayema, meaning whether we should conquer them. Yad Va Jayema, whether we should conquer them, or Yadiva no Jayeyuhu, or whether they should conquer us. So neither option looks like a good option, he says. First, like we have said before, that if one is a frying pan, then if one option is a frying pan, then the other option looks like fire. But he is not sure which is the frying pan and which is the fire. Neither option looks good to him. So first time Arjuna is now expressing some doubt after Krishna's strong words. And then he continues, Yaneva Hatva. Having killed whom? Yaneva Hatva. Najijivi Shamaha means we would not like to live. Having killed whom we would not like to live, because he says all of the pleasures and whatever he gets would be stained with their blood. So we would not like to live. Te dhartarashtraha avastitaha. Te avastitaha pramukhe dhartarashtraha. Those people whom having killed we would not like to live, the same people are assembled in front of us. He says, Te dhatarashtraha pramukhehe avastitaha. Pramukhehe means in front of us. The sons of Dhritarashtra are assembled. He said. So Arjuna is expressing his dilemma or doubt here, that if, like you say, fighting is my swadharma, and I do it, then the plus point is that I have done my swadharma. But then the minus point is that I have to kill my gurus and relatives, and I will not be able to enjoy this kingdom or the pleasures, because they would all be stained with their blood. So that has got a plus and that has got a minus. On the other hand, if I let them win, then the good part is I don't have to kill them. I don't have to, 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 I don't have to kill them, but then the minus point is that I would be giving up my Swadharma. And therefore, neither option is good. And so Arjuna is now expressing his confusion. Can't say which is better. But sometimes doubt or confusion is better than the wrong kind of clarity. So now Arjuna has made some progress, because from the wrong kind of clarity, he has come to some doubt and confusion. We will read the next verse, which is the key verse. So seventh verse. कार्पण्यदोषोपहतः स्वभावः
कार्पण्यदोषोपहतस्वभावः
पृच्छामि त्वां धर्मसम्मूढचेताः
पृच्छामि त्वां धर्मसम्मूढचेताः
यच्छ्रेयस्यात् निश्चितं ब्रूहि तन्मे
यच्छ्रेयस्यान्निश्चितं ब्रूहि तन्मे
शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधि मां त्वां प्रपन्नम्
शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधि मां त्वां प्रपन्नम्.
This is Prichhami. In the second quarter, we have Prichhami. So he says, I ask. So the first time now, Arjuna is explicitly asking Krishna something. He says, Prichhami. And Prichhami, and what kind of I is he describing himself as? He says, Karpanya doshopahata swabhavaha. So Karpanya dosha upahata swabhavaha means, upahata means incapacitated, polluted, infected. So upahata, incapacitated, polluted, infected by what? Karpanya dosha. Karpanya dosha means helplessness, misery, confusion. So he is describing himself as I who am incapacitated, infected, polluted by helplessness, misery, confusion. I am asking you, I ask, he says, Prichhami. And again, what kind of I? He says, Dharma sammudha chetaha means one, I am confused about what is dharma and what is adharma. One part of my mind says that fighting is your swadharma and therefore fight. And another part of my mind says that don't kill these relatives, fight, don't fight, give up the fighting, because fighting is the wrong thing to do. So I am dharma sammudha chetaha, he says. And whom does he ask? He says, Prichhami tvam, I ask you. Prichhami tvam. So Arjuna has clearly come to the second stage where he has discovered his helplessness. This is an important verse where Arjuna discovers his own helplessness and expresses it. Karpanya dosho pahata swabhavaha dharma sammudha chetaha aham prichhami tvam prichhami. And then he says, Bruhi. Bruhi means, please tell me. In the third quarter, he says, Yat shreyasyat nishchitam bruhi tanme. Bruhi means, please tell. And tell what? He says, Yat nishchitam shreyasyat tat bruhi is that which is definitely good for me. Yat shreyasyat nishchitam bruhi tanme means, tell me that which is definitely good for me. And he says, Shishyaha teham. Shishyaha teham means I am your student, he says. Shishyaha teham. And Shadhimam tvam prapannam. Shadhi means teach. Teach, please teach. And teach whom? Please teach me. Shadhimam. Tvam prapannam means I surrender to you. Please teach me the one who has surrendered to you. So this is a crucial turning point shloka, where Arjuna the soldier has become Arjuna the disciple. So Arjuna has discovered the second stage of helplessness. And Arjuna has also approached Krishna now for the remedy, and he has offered his studentship, his discipleship to Krishna. So Arjuna has now converted Krishna into a guru, into his guru. And therefore, the stage is now set for Parthasarthi, charioteer of Arjuna, to become the Gita Charya, or the teacher of the Bhagavad Gita. We'll continue in the next class. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.